Under the relentless sun of New Mexico, Calder Wyatt rode with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a man who had learned to measure time by the dust settling behind him. His mare, a dun named Sable, plodded through the cracked earth, her hooves stirring faint clouds that clung to the air like ghosts. Calder had been trailing a lost steer for half a day, its tracks fading into the parched ground. The silence of the desert was sacred to him, broken only by the creak of his saddle, the low whine of the wind, and the distant cry of a hawk circling above. At 40, Calder was a man carved by solitude, his face weathered, his grey eyes sharp but guarded, his hands calloused from a life of labor and loss. He preferred it this way, alone, quiet, predictable. But then he heard it, a sound so faint it might have been the wind playing tricks, a breath ragged and shallow, like someone had forgotten how to live. Calder froze in the saddle, his heart slowing to match the stillness around him. It came again, a whimper, frail as a thread about to snap. He dismounted swiftly, tying reins to a gnarled juniper limb, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He moved through the scrubby landscape, boots silent on the rocky ground, until he reached a clearing ringed by ancient cottonwoods. And there, beneath the oldest tree, he saw her. She hung by her wrists, arms stretched taut above her, her body limp like a broken doll. Her bare feet barely grazed the dirt, swaying slightly in the hot breeze. Her skin was sun-darkened, caked with dust and sweat, her long black hair matted with blood. Her chest rose in shallow, erratic breaths. She was alive, but only just. Calder's eyes flicked to the crude wooden sign nailed to the tree above her head. The words were scrawled in jagged red paint, angry and accusing. "White man, don't forgive." He stepped back, bile rising in his throat. The air thickened with menace, warning, a curse, a judgment. He scanned the ridges and boulders around the clearing, his hand instinctively resting on the knife at his belt. No movement, no sound, just the wind rustling through dead leaves, like whispered threats. "Christ," he muttered under his breath. "What the hell did they do to you?" The girl stirred faintly, her head lolling forward. Calder saw the raw red burns where the rope bit into her wrists, the dried blood on her cracked lips. She was young, maybe 18, with a high brow and a strong jaw, her cheeks hollowed by thirst and pain. "You hear me, girl?" he asked, his voice hoarse. No response. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said softer, almost to himself, stepping closer. The rope was twisted mesquite fiber, rough and old, meant to prolong suffering rather than end it. Calder pulled his knife, his fingers trembling despite himself. That sign screamed at him, its words echoing guilt he hadn't earned but felt all the same. He hesitated, the weight of unseen eyes pressing on him. But her groan, faint and desperate, broke through his doubt. "I ain't one of them," he whispered, sliding the blade under the rope. With one firm slice, it gave way. She collapsed forward, and Calder caught her just in time. Her body was fever-hot, impossibly light, as if her spirit had already her eyes fluttered open, dark, frightened, unfocused. He eased her to the ground, kneeling in the dust. Pulling his canteen from his belt, he wet a cloth and pressed it to her lips. "Easy now," he said. "You're safe, at least for the moment." She blinked, her hand clutching weakly at his sleeve. Calder glanced at the sign one last time, then draped his coat over her shoulders. "You got a name?" he asked gently. Silence. "Guess we'll find one for you," he murmured, lifting her with effort, cradling her like something precious and fragile. "But for now, you're with me." The sun dipped low as Calder reached his ranch, a modest outpost clinging to the edge of a desert too stubborn to forget its violent past. A lone windmill creaked at the fence line, and the barn sagged as if mourning. The house was simple, one room with a loft, its roof patched with sheet metal, but it stood solid, like the man who built it. Calder carried the girl inside, her fevered head pressed to his chest, her breaths faint as dry leaves skittering across stone. He laid her on the cot, unwrapping his coat carefully. Her eyes opened briefly, wide and distant, watching him in the flickering lantern light. He set a basin of water by her feet and knelt with a clean cloth. Her legs were bruised, one ankle swollen, her wrists marred by rope burns like cruel brands. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, breaking the heavy silence. "Just cleaning up a bit." He dipped the cloth in warm water, wringing it out, and gently washed the dust and blood from her skin. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. Calder worked in silence, his movements deliberate, as if tending to something sacred. The water turned murky with her pain. He avoided her gaze, though he felt it on him, wary, searching, like a blade half drawn. "Reckon you don't talk much," he said, not unkindly. "That's all right. Silence is better than most things." He wrapped her feet in clean cloth strips and set them on a folded blanket. You remind me of a river I used to camp by, he said quietly, almost to himself. Dry most of the year, looked dead. But after the rains, it ran fast and deep. Locals called it Quiet Snake. Don't know why just quiet. He studied her in the lamplight. Sharp cheekbones, cracked but full lips, lashes thick with sand. She was too young for such suffering, yet her eyes held something ancient, unyielding. I'll call you Lena, he said softly, just for now. You look like a Lena, quiet but strong. She blinked slowly, no protest, just breath. Calder stood, tucking a blanket around her shoulders. If you're hungry, there's beans. Not much, but better than air. No answer. He grabbed his bedroll and moved toward the door. He'd sleep by the barn tonight. Give her space. It wasn't right for a stranger to watch over her, especially one with blood in his past and questions in his heart. Before stepping outside, he glanced back. She had shifted slightly, eyes closed, lips still. He emptied the basin outside, watching the water vanish into the thirsty earth. In her dreams, she saw fire, horses, ropes cutting the sky, and hands rough but gentle washing away the hurt without asking for anything in return. The days that followed settled into the slow rhythm of desert life. But the silence in the house was different, now thicker, charged with something unspoken. Lena ate sparingly when Calder brought food, her movements cautious, eyes always alert, posture tight like a creature long caged. She never spoke, but he caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. At night, he left her the cot and slept in the barn, his rifle close. He told himself it was for her comfort, but the truth was more tangled. That sign, white man, don't forgive, still burned in his mind. Whoever wrote it meant for her to die slowly, and they might come looking. 3 mornings later, Calder found a boot print in the hard-packed dirt near the barn, smaller than his, fresher, with a military heel. He squatted beside it, tracing the edge with his finger. Cavalry, likely. His eyes scanned the ridgeline. Nothing but sagebrush and heat shimmer. Inside, Lena sat by the window, still as stone. She didn't look at him when he entered, but her body tensed. You seen anyone? He asked. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, silent. I think we've got company, he murmured. That evening he kept the lantern low and sat on the porch, rifle across his knees. Coyotes howled in the distance, and stars blinked into view like wary eyes. Lena paced inside, her footsteps soft but restless. At midday the next day, a rider appeared, dust curling behind a chestnut horse. The man wore a cavalry uniform, his rifle holstered, his jaw rough with stubble. Calder stepped off the porch, hand resting on his belt. You, Calder Wyatt? The man asked, reining in. Depends who's asking. Lieutenant Graham, Dust Hollow Station. We're tracking a fugitive. He handed down a folded notice. Calder took it, his gut twisting. A crude sketch of a young Apache girl stared back, sharp eyes. Long hair, wanted for murder and escaped dangerous. Reward, $50. Can't say I have, Calder said, folding the paper and handing it back. You're sure? Graham leaned forward. Small, quiet, might be hurt. We think someone took her near Cottonwood Flats. Ain't seen nobody but jackrabbits and a cow that don't. Listen. Graham's eyes narrowed. She's not just a runaway, Wyatt. She's with a violent group. That sign they left, they mean it. Calder's jaw tightened. If I see anything, I'll send word. Graham studied him, then nodded and rode off. Inside, Lena stood behind the curtain, her eyes locked on Calder. They came looking, he said, removing his hat. Showed me a paper, said you were wanted. I told them no. Her gaze flickered, confused. Suspicious. I don't know what you did. Lena, maybe. You'll tell me someday. But out here, a man makes choices. I made mine. He turned to the stove, stirring beans to avoid her stare. Behind him, she exhaled softly, and trust cracked the silence just a little wider. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Calder sharpened his knife on the porch. Each stroke a quiet rhythm against the stone. He focused on the motion, trying to keep his thoughts from drifting to Lena. A faint crunch of gravel made him pause. Lena was outside, her bare feet tentative on the earth, his blanket draped over her shoulders. It was the first time she'd left the house on her own. She moved slowly toward the barn, stopping at a patch of bare dirt. Kneeling, she began to draw with a stick. Calder set the knife aside and approached quietly. In the dust, she'd drawn a bird, wings outstretched, encircled by flames. The lines were bold, etched with raw emotion. The bird seemed alive, caught between agony and defiance. Calder squatted beside her, voice low. What's that? She didn't look up. For a long moment, she was silent, as if weighing whether to share her truth. Then she spoke, her voice dry and cracked. Bird in fire. My people's sign. She tapped the bird's center. My father's, our family. We painted it on tents, carved it on bows. Always flying, always fire. Calder felt the tension in her body, the tightness in her jaw. They came, she continued, haltingly. Soldiers, white coats, last spring, said we must move to a dry place, no food, no water, said we're danger. Her stick trembled. We said no, we fought. They burned, killed my mother, my brothers, the old ones in the tent. Her voice thinned. I ran, hid. They found me, beat me, tied me, called me thief, said I took a rifle. I didn't. She turned, eyes blazing. I did not steal. I did not kill. Calder's fists clenched, anger stirring in his chest. I believe you, he said, his voice steady. She dropped the stick, her shoulders shaking. Silent tremors gave way to raw sobs. She curled forward, hair falling like a curtain. Calder didn't reach for her. Instead, he pressed his hand into the dirt beside the bird, a silent testimony. She felt it. Her breathing slowed, and she lifted her tear-streaked face. You can call me Lena, she whispered. All right then, Calder said, voice like gravel. Lena, it is. They sat as the sun sank, the firebird fading into shadow, its truth enduring. That night, the wind whistled through the rafters, whispering like a ghost. Calder tended a kettle of beans by the fire, sleeves rolled. Lena stood by the window watching the desert. The silence between them was softer now, shared. She turned suddenly. You want to know the truth? He nodded, pausing his spoon. She sat across from him, voice clear. My father was a miner chief. Our band was small, peaceful. We traded with settlers, learned their god. A white woman was found dead near our land, throat cut. Her husband blamed us, but he killed her. Everyone knew, but they came anyways. Soldiers, ranchers, townmen. They burned our camp, shot my brothers, hung my father. My mother died holding prayer beads. They found me hiding, called me dangerous, hung me as bait. Why did you cut me down? She asked softly. Calder met her gaze. My family was killed last spring. Raiders, maybe Apache, maybe not. I was hunting, came back to ashes. My sister was 16. I heard her crying but didn't go in. She died waiting for help. The silence grew heavy. You saved me because you couldn't save her, Lena said. He nodded. She studied him. If I had been white, would you have cut me down? He stood, cupping her chin gently. I don't love skin, he said. I love what breathes under it. Her eyes whirled. They leaned into each other, their kiss hesitant, then deep. A release of held breath. Later, their shadows danced on the wall. A quiet mending begun. 3 days later, the wind carried the scent of smoke. Calder stood by the fence, rifle ready, as 3 riders approached. Local men, led by Joe Prescott, a self-appointed lawman. Heard you're harboring an Apache girl, Prescott said, spitting. There's a reward. You hear a lot, Joe, Calder said evenly. Don't make it true. We aim to check inside, Prescott sneered. You got a warrant. The air grew brittle. Calder stood firm. Ain't no girl here, just ghosts and goats. Prescott stared, then rode off, his threat lingering. That night, Calder burned a sign, white man, don't forgive, in the fire pit, its hate curling into ash. Lena stood beside him, her shoulder touching his. Thank you, she whispered, the words sacred. The next morning brought stillness, unnatural and heavy. Calder packed supplies, sensing time running out. Smoke rose on the horizon, too steady for a campfire. Lena stood by the fence, her face calm but questioning. We have to go, Calder said. Tonight, there's land south, past the border, where Apaches live free. We can make it. Lena took his hand. You'll come with me, she asked. She pressed her forehead to his chest. I want to live as your wife. Calder kissed her head, the weight of her words anchoring him. By sundown, they rode under starlight, leaving the ranch behind. 10 miles from the border, a shot cracked. Calder fell, blood soaking his side. Keep going, he rasped. Lena refused, dragging him to a hidden pass between cliffs. Bullets whizzed past, but the riders didn't follow. In the shadows, Calder collapsed, blood pooling. You said you wanted to be my wife, he said, pain and wonder in his eyes. I meant it, she replied, cupping his face. Lena prayed to spirits of fire and survival, betting everything on love. Months later, in a tent by a river, Calder lay recovering, his breath strong. Lena wiped his brow, smiling. You always this bossy, he teased. Only with stubborn patience, she replied. He asked her real name. She guided his hand to her heart. Iona, Peaceful river. Ayana, he repeated. You're my only peace. On the southern border, their lodge stood humble, surrounded by reeds. Ayana, pregnant, stitched a tiny shirt, humming. Calder trained a Mustang, glancing at her with quiet joy. One evening by the river, she whispered to their unborn child, "Your father didn't just forgive, he loved." Calder joined her, their fingers entwined, watching the stars. In a world of scars, they'd built a home where love endured, like a river, peaceful and true.